us to be here with you today. In many ways, I grew up on this stage, so it's a real honor for me to be back with you here today. And when I was a little boy, I dreamed of adventure. I was born in Iowa, about 10 miles away from our family farms in a little town called Boone. And now, Iowa is not a place that's blessed with a lot of topographical diversity. So as a little kid, I had to make up for what I lacked in opportunity, make up for with fantasy. And so I did that by reading books. Every day, my nose stuck in books. Books about Sir Edmund Hillary conquering Mount Everest. Books about Captain Webb making his way by swimming across the English Channel. And so as a little boy, I dreamed of adventure. Now, when I got a little older, I went down to the bank and I borrowed $10,000 from the bank in order to fund my first expedition, which would be 4 months spent in East Africa. And so as my friends were all going off in pursuit of their senior year of high school, I was jumping on a plane to head half a world away. And so as I flew across the Atlantic, I began to leave some familiar things behind. First of all, leaving behind my family, sleeping in my last bed, unplugging from electricity for the last time, having my last shower, using my last bathroom. And after weeks and then months, I found that I was out in the wilderness alone with myself. And what you find when you're left alone with yourself is there's things that you discover that you didn't imagine.
When I was a boy, I dreamed of being a doctor. I was your typical nerd overachiever, a fairly traditional course through school, high school, college, medical school. As I became an adult, I got enamored with nature and with adventure. In the year 2000, I took a mountain climbing trip to Nepal. It changed my life. I went prepared like the overachiever that I always am, with a backpack filled of stuff. Extra coat, extra hat, extra gloves. And I was on a journey to climb a mountain, to go further, farther, faster, higher. But on the way, Nepal taught me something that I didn't even know I was there to learn. As I traveled up the mountain with this backpack full of stuff, through villages where they had no coats and hats and gloves, I learned that the stuff I was carrying on my back was not only unnecessary, but literally a burden. And I gave away the stuff as I journeyed up the mountain. And I had a wonderful journey of climbing a mountain, but I also learned, in addition to the physical beauty and the adversity leading to personal growth, I learned that being out in nature, being with others, living a simple life, can teach you things about your heart and your soul and open you up to a spiritual dimension. I returned to Iowa, and life began again.
And so I became an explorer, chasing this feeling, pursuing adventure around the world, climbing mountains on 5 continents, Africa, Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, finally onto the Himalayas. I became a marathon swimmer, swimming across the Chesapeake Bay, swimming around the island of Key West, and finally off to the English Channel. I was living a life in pursuit of things that I thought were just out of reach, things that were just beyond the grasp of what were knowingly attainable.
As a doctor, I'm a radiation oncologist, and I was trained to treat tumors with fancy machines and computers with more memory than you can imagine, to design accurate, precise treatments to eradicate tumors with high-energy X-rays. And I learned how to do that very well. But over the course of the last 25 years, I've learned that being a cancer doctor isn't about treating tumors. It's about caring for patients and their families. I've learned that you cannot overestimate the value of an authentic relationship between patient and doctor, that you can't overestimate the therapeutic value of a hug. What began for me as a career in cancer treatment has turned into a ministry of healing.
And so I climbed Mount Everest, achieving a lifelong dream for me, a dream that was born when I was a little kid in Iowa. And I came home, and I fell in love. And just as quickly as our family of 2 was created, that family of 2 became a family of 3. And when a family of 2 becomes a family of 3, I think you'll find that your priorities begin to change. And some of those dreams that you have as a little kid begin to get a little tarnished. some of those big ideas may end up over on the bookshelf, collecting just a little bit of dust. So Katie and I had both finished graduate school. We had landed dream jobs. We'd bought our dream house. And we were falling into what really was a dream come true for us with this new little boy. And then Katie went in one day for her annual exam. And the doctor was just finishing up when she found something that was just a little bit unusual. And so she asked us to come back a few days later, and we had ultrasound. And during the ultrasound, we found something that was something that couldn't quite be explained. And so they took a biopsy, and the biopsy test results came back inconclusive. And about a week later, we met a surgeon who wanted to go in and have a look. And so I was sitting in the waiting room when the surgeon came in to tell me that my wife had cancer. And then I had the difficult job to go in and tell my new wife, along with my 1-year-old son, that our life was going to change.
When you're told you have cancer, it's like getting hit over the head with a 2x4. It tells you what you really already know, that we're not going to live forever, that our life is limited, but it reminds you that maybe you're not even going to live as long as you thought you were going to live. But diamonds are precious because they're rare. If diamonds were as plentiful as grains of sand, they would be valueless. Because our days on earth are limited, it makes each day more important. And what cancer can teach you is that if you're going to live a life that's authentic and full of purpose, today's a great day to start. It teaches you that possessions are meaningless. Experiences are valuable. It teaches you to reorder your priorities. It teaches you that if you have dreams that you want to accomplish, today's a good day to begin.
And so in the fallout of that diagnosis, Katie and I just stopped. And we took a moment to look around. And what we realized as we looked around, that we had begun to fill our lives with possessions. We had begun to take pleasure in surrounding ourselves with things. And in that moment when everything was tested, we realized that that was not giving us a life that was fulfilling. In that moment when it was time to test and answer all the big questions, we were left with just more mystery. And so we decided to begin to unpack our backpacks. Katie was going to stop working. She was going to spend some time enjoying our little boy, which meant without her income, we could no longer afford our house, so we sold our house. Without the two of us working, we no longer needed 2 cars, so we sold one of our cars. And we moved into a little apartment, and we realized maybe for the first time, as we looked back at our lives, the thing that we valued together as a couple and as a family was not these things that we had now given away, but the experiences that we shared. And life begins again.
And here's what Charlie and Kate dreamt. So Kate wanted to see the world, and Charlie wanted to see if he could push the limits of human endurance. So together, they came up with a plan to travel around the world on an 8,000-mile adventure called the World Triathlon that would include swimming the English Channel, riding his bike across Europe and Asia, and climbing Mount Everest again. They wanted to have this shared experience so that they could turn what had been a cancer diagnosis into a positive experience.
And so what began with the cancer diagnosis, we wanted to end as part of this cancer journey. And so we called someone who had become our friend, Dr. Deming, and he had an idea. He had found the transformative power of the Himalayas. And so working together, he collected a group of cancer survivors. We had 14 cancer survivors, 15 cancer caregivers that would trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. Now, this was a very unusual group, aged 27 to 63, representing 7 different types of cancer. Not people that you would look at and immediately imagine we're going to be climbing a mountain, certainly not something in the Himalayas. Some of these folks were just a month out of their radiation treatment. Some of them were still undergoing chemotherapy during their journey. This was a group of people that were not climbing because of their cancer, or not climbing in spite of their cancer, but they were climbing because of their cancer. People that never had a dream of the mountains, but now because of their cancer journey were beginning to realize that they could do more than what they had imagined.
Let me tell you about Kathy. Kathy is just one of 14 stories from this Everest trek. Kathy was born with a condition called neurofibromatosis, thousands of little tumors throughout her body, most benign. Over the course of her 52 years, she's had over 50 surgeries to remove tumors, mostly benign. 3 years ago, she had a large, malignant cancer removed from her forearm. 1 year later, it recurred. She had further surgery and radiation therapy and began her journey as a cancer survivor. Part of that journey included a cancer survivor program that I have out at the YMCA Healthy Living Program. It's a mind, body, spirit journey that teaches people how to put cancer in perspective and use cancer as a springboard to living more fully integrated, authentic lives. And part of that is vigorous physical activity. Through that journey, she gained confidence and courage. She wasn't an athlete. She never dreamed of climbing mountains. But because of the courage and confidence she gained through her cancer journey, she signed up for this trip to Everest Base Camp.
And now Everest is not a very easy place to get to. From the United States, it's really as far as you can get. If you fly to the east or to the west, it's the same distance. It's about a 40-mile hike from the end of the last road up to an elevation of almost 18,000 feet. So that's roughly 3,500 feet higher than the highest mountains in the United States. So once you get off the plane, you begin the hike, and the first thing you have to do is start crossing over these suspension bridges, which may feel like they're thousands of feet in the air.
Did I tell you Kathy was deathly afraid of heights?
And as you're climbing, you have to climb up these staircases that are made of rocks and seem to just go on forever.
Oh, by the way, Kathy has an artificial knee.
And the trail is very difficult, and so as you go, trekkers use poles so they can keep their balance.
And because of her surgery and radiation, she can't use her left hand to grip a pole.
And as you get higher and higher, it gets colder and colder. And the rocks sometimes are covered with black ice, which is very difficult to see.
Kathy's vision is poor, and her balance is horrible. All the physical attributes you want in your mountain climbing buddy.
And so if you can't do these things, sometimes you fall down.
And Kathy fell down a lot.
And as you get higher, it gets harder and harder.
Let me tell you about the last day on the journey up. So our journey was 9 days continuously up that was going to culminate in Everest Base Camp. The last day was the toughest. So we'd been on the trail for over 9 days. We had gotten to the point of 17,000 feet. The weather turned bad. It got cold. It started snowing. Everyone was affected by the altitude. Everyone had some nausea. There were headaches, vomiting, diarrhea. Kathy was pushed to her physical limits. She was exhausted, but she kept on going. As the trail became steeper and more narrow, she fell down again, and she got up. And what had been some little chitter-chatter along the trail became silence as we went higher and further and farther, and it snowed more, and we got up into the mountains, and we could see the glaciers, and the trail became more difficult, and Kathy fell again. Kathy got up. She continued her journey, and as we rounded the last rocky outcropping, we could see Everest Base Camp before us with all the yellow tents, and Charlie and his gang of mountain climbers there waiting for us. And as we rounded the last corner and got down into camp, Kathy fell again.
And so I walked out of the tent, and I see this pile, this pink pile of fleece laying there in the ground. And I began to think of the stories I had spent my life reading. I began to think of the journeys that I had undertaken. And in that moment, seeing this person that had overcome so much to make it someplace that was so unexpected, all those stories that I had lived and lived on became very meaningless. All of a sudden, the grit and the determination and the perseverance that a person can have was put in a very sharp focus. And as I sat there and watched Kathy, I could see she began to move. And she stood up one more time, and life began again.
Life begins again, and Kathy got up. 1 year ago today, we were at Everest Base Camp. Kathy was one of 13 cancer survivors that had made it to Everest Base Camp. That day, a year ago today, we came together as a group and did the American Cancer Society Relay for Life at Everest Base Camp. We'd carried with us hundreds of prayer flags that commemorated lives back here in Iowa that had been lost to cancer. The Relay for Life was all about celebration, number one, celebrating the survivorship of the 13, Kathy and the other 12, that had made it to Everest Base Camp. The second lap we did was about remembrance, remembering those that had lost their life to cancer. And the third lap we did at Everest Base Camp a year ago today was about fighting back, vowing that those that had died of cancer will not have died in vain, that their memory will inspire and in fact demand of us that we do what we can to reduce the burden of cancer. So we packed up our bags and we came back to Iowa, and life began again.
And journeys and expeditions are strange because oftentimes you reach the end of one journey just as you find that another journey has begun. You go off seeking something and you find something entirely different than what you sought. And you realize that's the something that you really need. And so these cancer survivors came home, having turned an experience that had been very negative into something that had become very positive. And with that positivity came inspiration and motivation to work together to create a world with less cancer. And so this new journey, they set out as fundraisers, as advocates, as lobbyists, as storytellers that would work together to build communities that could work together to build a better world. And so we created the organization called Above and Beyond Cancer to do that, to go out and to first of all change lives, and then working together to change the world. And as we change the world, our hope is to create a world with less cancer.
And so it all comes full circle. What began as individual quests to fulfill personal dreams comes together as a collective effort to change the world. And we realized how good it feels to fulfill your own personal dream, but how wonderful it feels when you give birth to others' dreams. So we have come together, and together, by working together, we realize life begins again.